Subunit 9 of your Unit 2 and the question number 1. At what minimal required frequency does the Chief Audit Executive report the results of internal assessment? Frequency means number of times. At what time? Without going further in detail, we know internal assessment has to be reported at least annually. So, at what minimal required frequency does the Chief Audit Executive report the results of internal assessments in the form of ongoing monitoring to the senior management and the board at least annually? And the external assessment once in 5 years. Remember, that's as per the standards. Internal auditors may include in their audit report that their activities conform are in accordance with the IIA standards. They may use this statement only if, I'm sure you remember, if it is supported by the results of quality program. If the internal audit department doesn't conduct quality program, then the internal audit department cannot claim to follow the standards of the IIA. I'm sure you remember during the lectures I emphasized this clearly. It has to be supported. I'll show you if you want to see. I'll show you where did we read this. We read it somewhere in our slides. So it is better to keep the theory in your head, because when it needs to, we can simply recall what we read. So repeated reading of the theory is recommended. Here it is. The IAA, that is the Internal Audit Department, mind it. IAA means Internal Audit Department, and the IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors, I'm sure you remember. The IIA cannot claim to comply, the audit department cannot claim to comply with the standard unless it has a functioning quality assurance and improvement program, which means it has to be supported by a quality program. If you do not follow the quality program, then reading rest of these BCDs not needed. When is initial use of the conformance phrase by internal auditors appropriate? Internally for 1 year, and when it's 5 years, look for the option external assessment. If you remember, the internal assessment once a year at least, an external assessment once in every 5 years. So after an external review completed within the last 5 years, this is the correct option as per the text we read. Following an external assessment of the internal audit activity, who is responsible for communicating the results to the board? Who reports to the boards? Without doubt, Chief Audit Executive. Next, which of the following would demonstrate that the internal audit department is in compliance with IIA practices? Alright, the last question, I guess. The Chief Audit Executive determines the form and content of the results communicated. The Chief Audit Executive cannot determine the form and the content of his own quality assurance system. It has to be discussed with the management, with the board, and then only we can determine the content and the form. Incorrect. B. The results of external assessments are communicated upon their completion. Yes, once in 5 years. That makes sense, and it's the right answer. Why not C? The results of periodic internal assessments are communicated at least twice a year. Again, this is incorrect. The internal assessments are to be communicated upon their completion at least once a year. And D, the results of ongoing monitoring are communicated upon their completion. No. The results of ongoing monitoring, which you call the internal assessments, they must be reported or communicated at least yearly. Once in a year. That's why it's the incorrect option. So that ends your subunit 2.9 and your entire part 2, unit 2 of your CIA part 1.